They say every family has its secrets, but I never thought mine would begin with just one sentence. Growing up, I used to think my mother's love was simply different. Not absent, just selective. There were days when she'd hold my younger brother in her arms for hours, her voice soft and warm like sunlight, while I stood in the doorway pretending not to care. I told myself I was older, more independent, that maybe I didn't need that kind of affection anymore. But deep down, I did. I always did. Her hugs felt rehearsed, her smiles timed. Even as a child, I could sense that something about our bond wasn't whole, like there was a missing piece neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Still, life went on. Birthdays, holidays, family dinners, all the perfectly framed pictures that made us look like a happy family. My friends would always say, "You're so lucky. Your family looks perfect," and I'd smile, pretending to agree, because that's what I wanted too, to believe in the picture. It happened one Sunday evening. The air smelled like roasted chicken and lemon pie, and everyone was gathered around the table. My father, my mother, my brother Daniel, and my younger sister, Lily. We were talking about nothing in particular. Weekend plans, old memories, when Daniel teased me about something from college. I laughed, rolled my eyes, said something back, and suddenly, the laughter stopped. My mother's eyes turned sharp, almost cold. "Of course she doesn't remember," she snapped, her tone cutting through the air. "Why would she? She's never really been one of us." Silence. The words echoed in my head before I even understood them. Never really been one of us. I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" I asked, half laughing, trying to make it sound like a joke. But she didn't laugh. She didn't even look at me instead. She pushed her chair back slightly, her hands trembling with anger. Or maybe something else. "You want to act like the perfect daughter now?" she said, voice low and bitter. "You're not even really my daughter. Emily, you were adopted. Just like that." 3 seconds of silence stretched into eternity. The air left my lungs. I felt everyone's eyes flick toward me, and then quickly away. My father's jaw tightened. Lily looked down at her plate. Daniel froze mid-bite, pretending to check his phone. No one said a word, not even to deny it. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself breathe. "Mom," I whispered, "that's not funny." Still nothing. She avoided my gaze. My father cleared his throat as if wanting to say something but couldn't. And in that heavy silence, I knew this wasn't a cruel joke. It was something real. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping the floor. "Say it again," I said quietly. "Tell me that's not true." Her lips pressed together. A flicker of regret crossed her face, but she didn't take it back. Instead, she looked down at her plate and said, "Maybe you should just stop pretending. Emily, stop acting like you belong." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just those words. I remember feeling like the room was spinning. Every picture on the wall, our family vacations, birthdays, graduations, suddenly looked like lies framed in gold. The taste of lemon pie turned bitter in my mouth. Without saying a word, I walked out of the dining room. I could feel their eyes following me, but no one stopped me, not even my father. My steps echoed down the hallway, into my room, where I finally let the tears come. They didn't come all at once. They came slowly, painfully, like my body was realizing something my mind still refused to believe. Could it be true? Was I really adopted? And if I was, why would she say it like that, in front of everyone, out of anger? If it was true, why had no one told me before? That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every moment from my childhood. Every time she'd scolded me harsher than the others. Every family secret they'd whispered when I entered the room. Every time I'd asked why I looked nothing like my siblings and my father had just smiled vaguely. All the small things that never made sense. Suddenly, they started to align like puzzle pieces falling into place. Maybe this was why I always felt different. But there was another part of me, a desperate part, still clinging to hope. Maybe she didn't mean it. Maybe she said it in anger. Maybe I was overreacting, so I tried to convince myself to wait until morning, until things calmed down. Maybe she'd apologize. Maybe we'd talk. Maybe there was an explanation that made sense. Morning came. But the house was quiet. My father had already left for work. My brother and sister avoided me. Their smiles felt forced. Their conversations rushed. My mother acted like nothing had happened. She hummed softly in the kitchen, stirring her coffee as if her words hadn't torn my world apart just hours ago. I wanted to scream, to demand an answer, but something in her eyes warned me not to. There was no guilt there, only distance, so I went upstairs, opened my closet, and stared at the boxes stacked on the top shelf. Old photo albums, yearbooks, childhood drawings. For the first time, I noticed how few of those photos actually had me in them. I was always there, on the edge of the frame, half turned away, smiling but never the focus. Almost like I was added in. That's when something inside me shifted. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was a strange kind of calm, the kind that comes when your heart stops fighting the truth and starts preparing for it. That night, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. If she's telling the truth, then who am I? The question haunted me. It wasn't just about identity. It was about belonging, love, and the meaning of family. But underneath that heartbreak, a quiet fire began to burn. If she was telling the truth, I was going to find it no matter what it cost, because sometimes the biggest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who once tucked you into bed and said, "I love you." And now I wasn't sure those words had ever been true. After that night, something in our house changed. Or maybe it was me who changed. The walls looked the same. The same family photos still smiled down from the hallway, but the air felt heavier. Every sound, every glance, carried a secret weight. I stopped calling her mom for a while. It didn't feel natural anymore. Every time the word almost left my lips, it stuck in my throat like a lie. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. My father started coming home late. When he did, he'd walk straight to his study, the smell of whiskey following behind him. Daniel avoided eye contact, while Lily acted like everything was normal, asking about my day in that too bright voice that sounded rehearsed. It was like they had all silently agreed to erase that moment from memory, but I couldn't. You can't just unhear something that shatters your world. One evening, I found myself standing at the doorway of my parents' room. They were talking, quietly, almost in whispers. I couldn't catch every word, but I heard enough. "You shouldn't have said it," my father muttered. Voice low. "She was pushing me," my mother hissed back. Always questioning, always acting like she deserves answers. She doesn't understand what she's asking for. "You promised me we'd never tell her," he said. Not like that. I froze. My heart was pounding so loudly I was afraid they'd hear it. Never tell me what? I backed away slowly, my hands trembling. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about adoption. Not just that. There was something deeper. Something darker. Over the next few days, I started noticing little details I'd never paid attention to before. A locked drawer in my father's study that hadn't always been locked. My mother burning old papers in the backyard one morning, saying they were just bills. A photograph I found in an old album, torn at the edges, showing my father holding a baby that looked like me, but the woman beside him wasn't my mother. Her face was half cut, but her eyes, there was something hauntingly familiar about them. I tried asking my father about it that night. "Dad," I began cautiously, "who's the woman in this photo?" He looked at the picture for a long moment. His fingers tightened around the frame. "That was a long time ago," he said quietly. "You don't need to worry about her," but he cut me off. "Drop it, Emily," and then he walked away. That night, I dreamed of that woman's eyes, the same soft hazel as mine. I woke up drenched in sweat, a thought burning in my mind. What if the woman in that picture wasn't just anyone? What if she was my real mother? The idea felt crazy, but once it entered my mind, I couldn't let it go. Days turned into weeks, and my home began to feel less like a house and more like a museum of lies. Every dinner was quiet, every conversation rehearsed. Then one afternoon, while cleaning the attic, I found an old shoebox tucked behind a stack of photo albums. Inside were yellowed letters, a hospital wristband, and an envelope that had my name written on it, in handwriting I didn't recognize. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Emily, if you're reading this, then you found the truth sooner than we expected. I'm sorry for what's been done to you. You were never meant to grow up believing their story. No last name, no return address, just the letter M. I stared at it for a long time, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Who was M? I couldn't take it anymore. That night, I decided to confront my mother, the woman who claimed to have raised me. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes, the sound of running water drowning out my footsteps. "Who's M?" I asked, my voice trembling but steady enough to make her freeze. The plate slipped from her hand and shattered in the sink. For a moment, she didn't move. Then she turned slowly, her expression carefully blank. "Where did you hear that name?" I held up the letter. "From this. Found it in the attic. You want to explain?" Her face went pale. "Give me that," she demanded, reaching for it. I stepped back. "No, you tell me who M is. Is she my real mother?" The silence that followed said everything. She didn't deny it. She just stood there, her eyes glossy with something between fear and guilt. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. "She's gone." That's all you need to know. Gone. That one word echoed in my mind long after I left the room. Over the next few days, she tried to act normal again, cooking breakfast, asking about work, pretending nothing had happened. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed proof. If no one in this house would tell me the truth, I'd find it myself, so I ordered a DNA test. Quietly, secretly, I sent it in under a different name. And then, I waited. Each day felt longer than the last. I watched my family from a distance, the way my father avoided my eyes, the way my mother's hands trembled every time she poured her coffee. Even my siblings seemed nervous around me, like they knew something and were scared I'd find out. Something about the silence made me realize the truth had been living among us for years. In whispers, in glances, in the spaces between words, and I was the only one left in the dark. One night, while scrolling through my emails, I saw it. "Your DNA test results are ready." My hands went numb. I opened it, my eyes scanning through the data, the numbers, the comparisons, until I saw the section that would change everything. No biological match found with registered parents. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I reread it 3 times, hoping I was mistaken. But there it was, clear and undeniable. The woman who raised me, the man who called himself my father. Neither of them were biologically related to me, and that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part came when I noticed the name listed under potential maternal match. The system had found a partial match, 87% similarity, with a woman named Marianne Holt AM, the same initial from the letter. I sat there, frozen, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting in my tears. Marianne Holt. The name sounded distant and familiar at the same time, like a whisper from a memory I never had. Was she alive? Did she write that letter? Did she give me away? Or was I taken from her? The questions swirled like smoke, choking every thought. Downstairs, I could hear the faint hum of the television, my mother's laugh drifting through the hallway, soft, practiced and hollow, and as I listened, something inside me hardened. I realized that love built on lies isn't love at all. That night, I promised myself one thing. I was going to find Marianne Holt, and the truth, no matter what it took. because I deserved to know who I really was. And if they had stolen that from me, then they were going to pay. Not with anger, not with violence, but with truth. And truth, when revealed, is the deepest kind of revenge. The next morning, I couldn't sit still. Every heartbeat sounded like a drumbeat of questions. I barely slept. The name Marianne Holt kept echoing in my head. I had her name, and I had a city. The test results listed her last known address in a small town 2 hours away. I didn't even think twice. By sunrise, I packed a small bag, printed the report, and got into my car. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running from confusion. I was running toward the truth. The highway was quiet that morning, just streaks of pale gold sunlight breaking through clouds. I replayed every moment from my childhood in my mind. Every time my mother pulled away when I hugged her. Every unanswered question about my birth. Every photograph with the corners conveniently cut. It was like my whole life had been edited, carefully scripted to hide something too dangerous to say out loud. And now, I was about to turn the final page. When I reached the address, my heart almost stopped. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a nursing home. A quiet, gray building with white curtains fluttering in the windows and a faint smell of antiseptic in the air. I stepped inside, clutching the DNA report in my trembling hands. A nurse looked up from the desk. "Can I help you?" "Yes. I'm looking for someone. Her name is Marianne Holt," she paused. "Room 214. I thanked her and walked down the hallway, each step echoing against the tiled floor like thunder. When I reached the door, I hesitated. What if I was wrong? What if she had no idea who I was? But deep down, I knew. I knocked softly. "Come in," a frail voice answered. I opened the door and froze. There she was, a woman in her late 60s. Hair silver and thin, eyes hazel, the same hazel as mine. For a moment, she just stared at me, then her lips trembled. "Emily?" she whispered. The way she said my name, soft, broken, familiar, made my chest tighten. I didn't remember her voice, but something inside me recognized it. I think you knew my parents," I said carefully. "Or maybe I was your daughter?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I knew this day would come," she said softly. "I used to dream about it." I sat down slowly, my heart hammering. "Please," I whispered. "Tell me everything." She took a shaky breath and began. "You were born in St. Mary's Hospital. I was only 19. I wasn't married. Your father had already left me when he found out I was pregnant. My family wanted nothing to do with me. When you were 2, I got very sick, a heart infection. The doctors said I might not make it. I had no one to care for you. That's when they came." I leaned forward. "Who?" "Margaret and Thomas Lewis, my supposed parents. They were volunteers at the hospital. They seemed kind, Margaret. She held you while I was in the ward. You didn't cry with her. She said she'd watch you until I got better." Marianne's eyes clouded with pain. "But when I came back, you were gone. They told me the couple moved. No forwarding address. I searched for years, Emily, years. But they changed your name, disappeared completely. Every letter I sent was returned." She began to cry softly. "I thought you were dead." The room blurred as tears welled in my own eyes. I couldn't breathe. It felt like my entire life. Every memory, every birthday, every hug, had been built on stolen time. "They told me I was adopted," I said, my voice shaking. "But they made it sound legal, like it was some act of mercy." Marianne looked at me, her voice trembling. "It wasn't mercy. It was theft. She couldn't have children, I guess. She saw you as a miracle she could just take." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My hands clenched around the DNA report, my heartbeat deafening. "So all these years," I whispered, "I was living in someone else's lie." She nodded slowly. "I wanted to tell you. I even went to your old house once when you were about 8. I saw you through the window. You looked happy, and she looked at you like you were hers. I didn't have the heart to break that. So I walked away. Her voice cracked. But not a day went by that I didn't miss you. Silence filled the room. The kind of silence that feels heavy with years of lost time. I reached out and held her hand. Her skin was soft, fragile, trembling. I found the letter, I said quietly. The one you left for me, she smiled faintly. I hoped you would. When I finally left the nursing home, the sky was dark, the wind cold, but inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Clarity. I knew now that the woman who raised me wasn't my mother. She was the thief of my story, and the real woman who gave me life had lived in silence. Blamed herself for something she didn't do. That truth hit me harder than anger ever could. Driving back home, I kept replaying everything. The way my father had avoided my questions. The way my mother had screamed that I wasn't hers, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear that her perfect picture would crack. Fear that I would find her truth, but I wasn't the scared daughter anymore. I was the woman who finally knew where she came from. When I got home, my mother was waiting. She stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes sharp. So, she said coldly, you went to find her. I didn't answer. Did she tell you her version of the story? The poor, helpless mother act? She told me the truth, I said. The truth? She laughed bitterly. The truth is, she was unfit. You would have ended up in foster care. We saved you, I stepped closer. You stole me. Her face hardened. We gave you everything. Except honesty. That word hit her like a slap. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her expression. Guilt, regret, maybe even fear, Emily, she said quietly. You wouldn't understand. You were my only chance to be a mother. I couldn't lose that. I shook my head. You never were my mother. You were just someone who took what wasn't yours. Her eyes filled with tears. I loved you. I know, I whispered. But love built on lies doesn't survive truth. She didn't stop me when I walked out. Maybe she knew it was over, not our lives, but the illusion we had lived in. That night, I drove back to Marianne. We sat together on her small balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the quiet night sky. She handed me an old photograph of her holding a toddler. Me. I smiled through my tears. You kept it all these years? She nodded. It was all I had. I took her hand again. You have me now, and for the first time, I felt like those words truly belonged to someone. That night, I made a silent promise, not of revenge through anger, but of justice through truth. My revenge would be quiet, graceful, undeniable, because sometimes the greatest punishment isn't rage. It's watching the truth unravel everything someone built on lies. And as I held my real mother's hand, I finally understood. Revenge didn't have to destroy me. It could set me free. The days after confronting Margaret felt strangely quiet, almost too quiet, like the calm after a hurricane that had torn everything apart, leaving me standing in the wreckage, unsure of where to begin cleaning. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waking up to someone else's version of me. There were no more staged smiles at breakfast, no carefully chosen words meant to keep the peace. Just silence, and in that silence, I started hearing myself. I spent the next few days staying with Marianne. Her small apartment smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The walls were lined with photographs, not expensive portraits or polished frames, but real, imperfect moments. She made tea every morning and would hum softly while stirring sugar into the cups. And sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, she'd just stare at me with that quiet disbelief, the kind of look only a mother gives after years of praying for something that finally came true. I don't want you to hate them, Marianne said one morning, her voice soft but steady. Hate burns the person holding it. I looked down at my tea. Then what do I do with all this anger? Turn it into something beautiful, she said. Make truth your revenge. Those words stayed with me. For years I had lived in a world built by someone else's lies. Every memory I had was touched by her need to hide the truth. Every family photo, every story, every celebration, and now I wanted my own version of that world. One where I didn't have to pretend, so I started documenting everything, old photographs, letters, the hospital records Marianne had. Kept even the DNA report. It wasn't about exposing her publicly, not. Yet it was about reclaiming my story. Each document felt like a piece of me returning home. A week later, I drove back to my old town, not to see Margaret, but to visit my father. He'd been quiet through all of it, silent, almost complicit, and I needed to know why. When he opened the door, he looked. Older, maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was relief that the pretending was finally over. "Emily," he said softly. I took a deep breath. "I'm not here to argue. I just need to know. Did you know?" He didn't speak at first, just turned away and motioned for me to come in. Inside, the house felt different. The same furniture, the same walls, but stripped of warmth. Finally, he sat down, rubbing his temples. "Yes," he said quietly. "I knew." My heart sank. "Why didn't you stop her?" He exhaled shakily. "Because I loved her. And because she told me if I said anything, she'd leave and take you with her. I couldn't lose you, Emily. You were everything." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream that love wasn't supposed to look like silence. But all I felt was exhaustion. "You could have told me," I whispered. "I wanted to," he said, tears glistening in his eyes. "But every time I looked at you, I saw what she'd taken from someone else, and I hated myself for it." I stood up, clutching my coat. "Then this is your chance to make it right." He looked up, confused. "I'm going to tell the truth, not out of revenge, but because I deserve to exist without a lie hanging over me. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking you to have the courage you should have had years ago." He nodded slowly. "If that's what it takes to give you peace, then I'll stand by you." That night, I went through the final set of boxes Marianne had kept. Hospital bills, faded photos, even a small locket with a picture of baby me. I held it close, tears slipping down my cheeks. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoring balance. The truth wasn't just mine, it was hers, too. A few days later, I called Margaret. She didn't answer the first 3 times, but on the 4th, her voice came through, sharp, defensive. "What do you want now, Emily?" "I'm not calling to fight," I said calmly. "I just wanted to tell you that I met Marianne." Silence. "She's alive?" "She is," I said. "And she forgave you." Her voice trembled. "She what?" "She forgave you," I repeated. "Not because you deserve it, but because she doesn't want to carry hate anymore." I heard her breathing on the other end, uneven, shaky. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm doing what you couldn't, letting go." She started crying quietly. "Emily, I'm sorry." I didn't answer right away. For the first time, I wasn't the daughter begging for love. I was the woman choosing peace. "I know," I whispered, and ended the call. That night, I uploaded a video to a private family channel I'd once used for birthdays. It wasn't dramatic. No accusations, no anger. Just me, sitting in front of a plain white wall, speaking honestly for the first time in my life. "My name is Emily," I began, "and this is my story, not the one I was told, but the one I discovered. I was raised in love, but that love was built on silence. And silence, no matter how gentle it looks, is still a lie. But today, I choose truth, not to shame anyone, but to remind anyone listening. You are allowed to ask questions, even if the answers break your heart." I uploaded it and didn't look back. The next morning, I woke up to hundreds of messages, some from old friends, some from strangers. People shared their own stories of lies, adoption, betrayal, forgiveness. I realized I wasn't alone, and somehow, that made the years of pain feel worth something. A week later, my father visited Marianne. They talked for hours, both crying and laughing like old ghosts finally finding peace. And when I walked in with coffee, they both looked at me, as if I was the bridge between two worlds that were finally learning to meet. For once, there was no pretending, no lies, just truth, quiet, powerful, healing. One evening, as Marianne and I watched the sunset from her small balcony, she said softly, "You know, I used to think revenge meant making someone else suffer. But watching you, I realize, real revenge is living free." I smiled faintly. Then I guess I finally got mine. In that calm, I found my closure. I didn't need to ruin anyone's life or scream my pain to the world. The truth had already done its work. It had set me free. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. But as peaceful as it seemed, one final chapter remained, the day I decided to truly walk away and never look back. They say the hardest part of healing isn't confronting the truth. It's learning how to live after it. The storm had passed. The confessions were made. The tears had dried. And yet, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I didn't quite recognize. Not broken, not lost, just new for the first time. I wasn't someone's secret, someone's guilt, or someone's shadow. I was me. It was a cold Sunday morning when I decided to go back. One last time. To the house I once called home. The place where every lie began. I didn't go there for closure. I went there to say goodbye. The front gate creaked just like it used to. The garden, once immaculate, looked tired and overgrown. The roses she used to trim every weekend now hung heavy and wild, as if even they had stopped pretending to bloom for her approval. I walked through the hallway slowly, touching the edges of the picture frames that once told a story that never truly belonged to me. Photos of our family. Perfect smiles, matching sweaters, vacations that now felt like scenes from someone else's movie. In the living room, Margaret sat in her usual chair staring at the window. Her hair was streaked with more gray now, and her eyes, once sharp and unyielding, looked tired, softer. When she saw me, she didn't speak. She didn't have to. I placed a small envelope on the coffee table. "What's this?" she asked quietly. "The truth," I said. "All the documents. The letters. Marianne's statement. Everything." She hesitated, looking at the envelope like it was a ticking bomb. "I don't need to destroy you," I said softly. "You've already done that to yourself. I just need to let go." Her eyes filled with tears. "Emily, I held up a hand. "Don't. You've said enough in your silence." Then I turned toward the door. For a moment, I thought I'd feel anger or satisfaction or pain. But all I felt was peace. A quiet, steady peace that settled into my chest like sunlight after a long night. Outside, the wind was cool and steady. The sky stretched wide, open, endless. I got into my car, and before starting the engine, I took one last look at that house. It no longer felt like a place I belonged to. It was just a chapter, a painful, necessary chapter, that had finally ended. A few weeks later, I helped Marianne move into a new apartment closer to the sea. She said she'd always dreamed of hearing the waves from her window. We painted the walls ourselves, soft blue, the color of calm. When we finished, we sat on the balcony, sipping tea as the sunset melted gold across the horizon. "I used to wonder why this happened," I told her. "Why my life had to start in a lie," she smiled gently. "Maybe because you were meant to end it in truth." I looked out at the sea, vast, beautiful, and untamed. She was right. I'd spent so long trying to rewrite my past. But maybe some stories weren't meant to be rewritten, just understood. That night, I opened my journal and began writing again. Not about pain, but about purpose. Not about loss, but about rebirth. I wrote, "Sometimes we think revenge is loud, dramatic, explosive, final. But the real revenge is quiet. It's waking up one morning and realizing the person who hurt you no longer controls the way you breathe, think, or dream. And for me, that was enough. In the following months, my video continued to spread, not because it was scandalous, but because it was honest. People connected with it. Strangers who had been lied to, abandoned, manipulated, silenced. They wrote to me, "Your story gave me courage to face mine. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for reminding me that truth doesn't need permission." And with every message, I realized something deeper. My pain had become someone else's healing. Eventually, I launched a small podcast called The Unwritten Truth. Every episode, I invited people to share the stories they were once afraid to tell, not to seek pity, but to reclaim power. It grew faster than I expected, and in every voice I heard, I recognized pieces of my own journey. One guest, an older woman, said something I'll never forget. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be spoken once, and it never goes away. She was right. Truth doesn't expire, and neither does healing. Months later, I stood on the same cliff where Marianne and I had first reunited, the one overlooking the endless sea. The wind was fierce that day, tugging at my hair, my coat, my heart. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I forgive you. Not for you, but for me." Then I let the words drift into the wind. They carried something heavy away from me, something I didn't need anymore. That was the moment I truly walked away. And maybe that's the lesson I want to leave behind. Revenge doesn't always mean breaking someone else's world. Sometimes it means rebuilding your own, stronger, quieter, and free. Because healing is the most elegant form of revenge. Soft background music fades in. Slow piano. Emotional buildup if you're still listening. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe someone lied to you, broke you, made you doubt who you are. If so, hear me. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to pretend that the pain didn't happen. You don't have to shrink to make anyone comfortable. Speak your truth. Even if your voice trembles, walk away. Even if your knees shake. Because one day, you'll look back and realize the person they tried to destroy became the person they could never be. Free. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, not for numbers, but so that someone out there who's still living in silence might finally hear, your truth matters, and your peace is your power.